So after teaching for years and years, I know this is the worst possible time of the day to be sitting and listening after lunch between 1 and 3. And I myself could never make it through classes without falling asleep when I was taking the classes. So thank you for being, so attentive in spite of that. It's hard to do. So we're going to move into the third good now, this mysterious martyrdom good, or the evangelization of the pagans, or nowadays it's sometimes referred to as outreach, which sounds so mundane, compared to martyrdom. But one thing to think about, even before I begin, is if you're a person who has a serious call to solitude, right, where you are most at home in the self, most at home in silence and solitude, it can be a form of martyrdom to have to be in the world. I mean, just that alone can be a real, almost an agonizing thing for a while, Especially, I think, in the initial stages of Oblate life, when you're just beginning to taste the beauty of this kind of new solitude you never allowed for yourself, this Sabbath day of your rest, to go into your cell. You've created a kind of daily cell time for yourself. It automatically sensitizes you to everything. That was one thing I sure wasn't expecting, but I've heard of a lot of oblates saying the same thing, is that when we're in full type A gear, rushing along the freeway of life with our to-do list checking off all the time, we've almost become hardened to spiritual things. We're instead of having this purity of heart, what we have is this focus on getting stuff done and being productive and, checking things off the list and all that. And so when you suddenly begin to deliberately set that mode aside on a regular basis, it's almost like your skin becomes exposed, to the elements. You just become much more sensitive to everything, including noise. And I remember, because I started doing this with these 4 young adolescents all banging around in the house and playing music and wanting to watch movies and, all that kind of stuff, and yelling at each other and fighting. And there was so much rush or whatever. It was almost unbearable. I felt like I was being, burned or something every time this would invade this new little sanctuary of silence I was creating. And for a while I thought, this can't be right. This can't be the way it's supposed to work. That maybe this whole threefold good thing is wrong. Maybe I just need to get back into my soldier mode and make it through the hustle bustle without allowing this to batter my spirit so much. But you do move through that, and there comes a time where more and more you carry the silence with you. You carry the solitude with you. But still, as we're looking at this third good, it can be a shock to the system when you then find yourself drawn back in very real physical ways to working in the world. I had this big dream that when I finally really did retire, which I did last June from teaching forever, I'm never going to have a paying teaching job again. That is a promise. And I thought, I was just looking forward to, I'm finally going to be able to sit at the turtle pond in the middle of the day for a little while and just stare at the ducks and the turtles and be in this hesychism and all this stuff, and look what I'm doing, I found out that the monks can take a lot of time out of my life, and it's and it took a while to realize, this is the third good. I mean, it's really clicking in at this point. Before I needed to make a living, and there were things I did simply for financial reasons. I had to do them, trying to incorporate the third good into all those activities. Now, this really is the third good. This is a kind of you're ready to willingly give, and even though you are a person who loves solitude. And that's an interesting tension. It really is. And so there's a neat term that's come out of that called the Martyrdom of Love. This is something, I don't know if it was Father Robert who coined this phrase or not, but it's not the physical martyrdom we think of, and that we're seeing acted out around the world these days in the Christian Middle East, with all the awful things that are happening to the Christian populations, forms of genocide going on. But it's a different kind of martyrdom. I would describe it as the total giving of the self to God. For so long, our whole goal is to try to find God in the midst of all this little stuff, and get to this place where we feel like we're walking with God all the time, every day. And then there's this next step of saying, okay, now I'm ready to give it up to you, totally. Whatever I think I'm going to do with my retirement, obviously I'm not. God has, I thought I was going to write monk mysteries, And instead I'm working on the Oblate guidebook. And what I'm discovering, which I think is the beauty of the third good, is everything is tied together. And I'm not kidding about the monk mysteries. That's exactly why I did retire. And I'm in the middle of all this research. And I was thinking, wait a minute, here's this research, but here's all this research, for the Oblate program. And I'll just thinly disguise all of it and put it over here. And I think that's when for me, the feeling of a kind of steady joy versus the champagne bubbles that I used to seek out all the time, the champagne bubbles of happiness, those kind of highs you would get, spiritual highs or whatever. It's smoothed into much more of a steady joy, and that joy is to some large degree based in feeling like all the parts of my life are now woven together. There's not these separations between people, things, whatever. It's one thing now, and it's kind of an adventure. It's sort of like you're on one of those cars that drives itself, and you don't really know where the car is going anymore, But it's exciting. I think it was G.K. Chesterton said that Christianity is supposed to be the great adventure, and that's what it's beginning to feel like. And I think that is a big part of the third good, this sense of the unknown, that there's something lying ahead on the trail that we haven't figured out yet, and as long as we're willing to be used, we'll be in the middle of it. So, of course, at the time of Bruno of Courfort, that term martyrdom referred to the willingness to die for the sake of Christ in the way that the five brothers had during their mission to Poland. Interesting when you read that book, not only were they willing to be martyred, but they hoped to be martyred, but not for personal glory or because they wanted to be saints. They really believed that if baptism washes away sins, martyrdom totally extinguishes them. So even in that, they were approaching martyrdom in a kind of humble way, And then, interestingly, Romuald himself, who was such a hermit at heart, after the martyrdom of the five brothers, he felt a burning desire for martyrdom. And he actually set off in this long journey to Hungary, hoping to die there for Christ. He never arrived there, but he was responding to a call that's been heard all through monastic centuries, even by, people who have gone into a monastery, which is this business of giving up our life for God. Martyrdom was seen as a participation in the mystery of Christ's saving death. It was the highest kind of spiritual discipline, only possible for those who had become pure of heart. I'm trying to think, nowadays how I think about this in my own life, and I think anybody who's in a really happy marriage, especially as we get older, more and more you're thinking about the time you're going to lose your partner or your partner loses you. It just becomes a ever-present kind of thing in your mind. And my husband happens to be 10 years older than me, and so it's very likely I'm going to be the one left behind. And I'm trying to think consciously about that upcoming event in my life. And of course, you can't prepare for the grief that you go through, But I'm trying to think of it as that will be my call into a kind of martyrdom that I would never choose, But what can I do with that? What can I give in that time? I think grief, suffering are things that we don't choose, but we can choose how to handle when they happen to us. We can still choose to be vehicles for the love of Christ, even in the depths of that awful time. So I think it's more helpful to think of that third good as the kind of martyrdom of love, Let's see. I would also describe this third good as a kind of overflowing of love upon the world. Something that we almost can't help at a certain point, because we have experienced the primacy of love in community, this beautiful community. We've also experienced this kind of beautiful rest for our souls in the silence and solitude of the self. And that joy that comes with it begins to overflow on the world. And so you find yourself, out in public, grinning like a fool at people, total strangers. I'll walk down the street and I'll see somebody, I'm smiling at them like they know me, and they look at me. Most of the time they smile back. Sometimes they look like they want to call 911. I was traveling years ago in Russia, and I was told to stop smiling so much by the people I was staying with. I said, why? They said, because that's highly suspicious activity. In a country where people have, been used to being betrayed by one another, you don't go around doing that. You keep a stone face. And one thing that I really noticed was that I can't help myself. I'm always hugging people now. And sometimes it's completely inappropriate circumstances to be doing that, And again, they'll look surprised, but I know it's just a natural extension of doing this around the altar. You wouldn't let us do it today, but, normally when we have Eucharist and we pass the peace, there's a lot of hugging that goes on, and that begins to just start flowing out into the world. And I can't think that that's a bad thing, I think that that's something that people are starving for, are expressions of love. And when they happen spontaneously like that, I think that's got to just be a gift, that we're giving. So even on that kind of level, we can start living out the third good. Of course, there's a ton of good work that can be done in the world that's more formal types of work. And when you start looking at the Oblate community, it's amazing what different kinds of things people are doing. There's a lot of people who have become spiritual directors sitting in this very room, which is an enormous service to people who, in big parishes, priest absolutely doesn't have time for that. So to be able to help somebody on their spiritual path is gigantic. There are people in counseling, people who are physicians, pastors, attorneys, professors, financial advisors. One of the most amazing people I've met in recent years has been very involved, totally against his will. He's just pulled in. Nobody made him do it. This wasn't somebody asking him to do it. It was a call he felt in his retirement the first time he made a retreat, which he was told to do for his health's sake, because he was such a hard-driving CEO. And he was told to slow down, make a retreat. He's now become like this huge financial advisor to the monastery, And he keeps saying, "How did this happen?" And yet you can tell it's causing him great joy, because this is a way I don't know that he's tasted this before. This giving back of all the years of skill he's built up. There's farmers, computer specialists, all kinds of stuff that people are doing, and maybe they're still doing it for financial reasons to make a living, but because of this kind of life, more and more they're able to incorporate into that this spiritual gift that they can give through it. To me, the people I notice the most, maybe because of teaching, are young people. Katie and I were just talking about this. She's definitely got the award for being the most baby of baby oblates at this point. She's not yet taken her vows, but she's getting there, or made her promise. It's not an oblate vow, it's a promise. And we were just saying, Katie, you're going to be the point man for the next generation, because, this does need to be passed on. For the last 5 years, I was teaching in a writing program that was advertised as the only Judeo-Christian MFA program in the country. And so our students tended to be church kids, and they weren't kids. Some of them were 45 years old or whatever, low residency program. So they mostly held down jobs, had families, very busy people working really hard. And what I found in them, surprisingly enough, was spiritual hunger. They might have been in church all their life. They were still experiencing it. They were looking for something more than they were getting. And they didn't even know what it was. But you could see them responding to certain stuff we were reading, because we had a huge reading list for them. I think of that poor group they refer to as the nuns. And I'm not talking N-U-N-S, the N-O-N-E-S's. Almost the whole millennial generation is supposedly now, when they check the box for religious affiliation, they check none. And it's not even that they're so opposed to religion. They've lost the cultural passing on of this has been now broken and severed. And so, in a sense, we're back in pagan territory, in our own country, because we're dealing with folks that are literally ignorant about, they're illiterate when it comes to Christianity. They don't know. I taught a class at Paula years ago where we were looking at portions of the Bible, and one day we were teaching 1 Corinthians 13. And this young woman came up to me afterwards who was a pre-med student, smart, highly educated. She goes, "So that's where that came from." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I heard that at a wedding once. I thought that was the coolest thing, but I never knew that it came from the Bible." I had somebody ask me in that same class what Easter was. All she knew was the bunny. She didn't know what Easter was. So there's a pervasive religious illiteracy now in our country. And so this is another way that, we can evangelize without having to go to Prussia or Poland like these guys did. So how can you as an oblate incorporate the threefold good into your life?
I got rid of the computer. I don't have a computer. And I try to unplug my phone as much as I can. I'm a substitute teacher, so I get a lot of calls a day. So once I've got a job for tomorrow, I just unplug it. Now, sure, it takes everyone else off, because they always want you to do one more thing. Mm-hmm. But you can't find me, because I'm not plugged in. That's when you get your quiet time and your time back with nature. Mm-hmm. See, after coming to Cal Poly, getting my 2 masters, I come from Westwood. I thought it was a little slow here. So I went back to work in Beverly Hills, Neiman Marcus, doing my counseling in Pasadena. And I wanted to make big bucks. But the noise and all that faster, quicker got to me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I decided to come back here. And I'd actually danced with Prince, the guy who died this year, and George Michael, the guy who died a few months ago, because I was invited to all the cool clubs. So it's weird that I actually met the 2 people who died this year who were kind of big stars. But, just coming back and finding that silence that you just can't get when the world keeps pulling you, and noise. And the background TV and how many stations and news can I watch. At least that's me. Mm-hmm. So, everybody might find their own way, but it really makes people angry that they can't email me.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of we have to go through adjustments of the practicalities of our life to make it happen. Yeah. And if that's what it requires, that's what it requires. Yeah. We did not have a TV for 20 years because of that. We just got rid of it. Yeah, Katie.
Well, I think that's a great idea. There's a whole other side to that.
Yeah.
I've had several people say to me, "Wow, I love the things that you post on Facebook." Mm-hmm.
Oh,
because if you look at on a consistent level, over a period of years, what I'm posting on Facebook, all in some way, it doesn't necessarily have to be religious, mm-hmm. but it has to have a certain character to it. Mm-hmm. So it has to have a certain authenticity. It has to be honest. It has to be good. It has to somehow, in some way, incorporate, if you're not a religious person, maybe, how do you do yoga? Is yoga something that would help create that silence? Or something academic? So I kind of go a little in the opposite direction, but I have a sort of theme that is emerged. And a lot of people now come to me and say, oh, hey, do you know anything about this? Or could you research on this, or on this, or on this?
I think the key is the disciplined use of what are essentially neutral things. I mean, they're not inherently good or evil, but they can be used for either. And part of this oblate life is learning that discernment between how do you employ these wonderful vehicles, but there may well be a period where you just simply can't have them. You need to rewire your own circuits, and so you just need to banish certain things for a while until you're ready to have them back. And I would say that's one of the big themes, is this development of very, very straight up honesty with the self about where the weak planks are, and then avoiding stepping on them until you can get them repaired, or you'll crash through into the swampy little pond. Yeah, Gail?
It's not exactly complete silence, but I've always been a very physically active woman, and I used to jog more than I do now, but I find a lot of time for interior prayer and meditation when I'm outside walking, jogging, whatever, because I don't focus on people or what's going on today. I just go out there, and actually my heart and mind are re-singing the Gloria. And then it just goes from there for a good hour. Yeah. For years I've taken a daily rosary walk. So I walk for about 20 minutes every morning, and I say the rosary while I'm doing it. And I learned that from Father Bernard up at the Hermitage, because we used to take these evening walks together, and we'd always do the rosary. And so, and that's not multitasking. That's not spiritual multitasking. That's finding the right rhythm for your own body, your own, If you do better focused on the prayer while you're moving than if you're sitting, then move, Like Lori said today, she's been having to sit a lot with her new job, and she can't just sit here all day and try to absorb this without moving a little bit, so she stood up for a while, So it's getting to know ourselves and what our physical demands are and all that stuff. Yeah. Yes. Teresa, is it Teresa? Teresa, yeah.
Especially so much focus today of being on love. The chapter that's on psychological investigation and implications for living together alone, something to that effect.
Is that one by Bede, Brother Bede?
It's in
Privilege of Love?
Right.
Yeah,
And, I think I've pretty much highlighted that whole chapter, because that really speaks to me. There's one section that is focused on love versus need, and how we will interact with others motivated more by our needs than it is authentic love, and that we can seek to manipulate other people's behaviors and even communities' behaviors based on our needs. And that really spoke to me a lot, and I thought, there's something else, another piece of my life, that the image of getting on the balcony, and for myself, I really embrace that. I try to share that with others. I think we all have that capacity naturally, but being able to find that place inside of us where you can be alone while you're in community. Like you were mentioning it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's that place of solitude, and I'm working on really trying to remodel that room to give it a little bit more space, because I think it's so essential to be able to self-monitor and be able to find solitude even when you're in a very busy life around you.
Yeah, so, to not allow yourself to be hijacked by the action.
Yeah. So, and it's so easy. And another little piece of wisdom from another book, I think it's called Everyday Sacred or something like that, from years ago, coming from a Native American perspective. And the way he describes it, he said that I know when it's time to go back into my cave, because I start feeling exaggerated. And I thought, I love that image because that's me.
Yeah.
I said, because there's so much Teresa in the room.
Yeah.
There's not room for anything else.
Yeah. You're taking up all the air in the room. Yeah, that's great.
So these three together, I think that,
Yeah.
it's actually balanced.
That's really good. Melanie, what were you going to say?
On Marian Feast Day, in the imagery of the incarnation that Father had during the Mass, I've been thinking I need to put a word in for just sheer grace. Because I've found that in my own life that being steeped in Scripture and songs has been such a profound experience that came sheerly by grace to me. I worked in ministry for a number of years and go to the religious education conference down in Anaheim, and somebody handed me a copy of the Magnificat, which is the daily readings, and you get tons of stuff there, and I was ready to toss it out, and I heard a sermon just about opening to Scripture again in that way, and that all those readings are speaking to each other and to you, me.
Mm-hmm.
And if we allow it, and there's a great line in James Joyce's Ulysses at the end, where there's this great soliloquy on saying yes. I will yes. And I feel like that surrender to that yes, for me, and not knowing any of the particulars was a necessary step, but that even when the yes was not total, that God can move and speak in 1,000 ways, through 1,000 ways that are particular to our situation, and that being open to that is part of this monastic charism and gift.
Mm-hmm.
And to be surprised at what can happen when the door opens and you've said, I will yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
That's a great way to end this day, I think. That's a good word for the... So, thank you, everybody, so much.
Can I have the last word?
Really? Wow, okay.
Then we'll end this great day. When Cyprian wrote an article about the Threefold Good, he quoted one of the previous prior generals of the Camaldolese order, looking for a symbol. And one of the symbols for the Threefold Good, which is not such a good symbol, was the ladder. So you start at the bottom with the evangelization, which is third class. And then you climb up the ladder a little bit more to the community piece. And then you climb the ladder one more time and you're at the golden solitude. And that's what, one image would say it's all about. But of course the prior general says that's not the image of it at all. The original image was the image of a starburst. And one piece of it bursts over here, and another piece bursts over there, and another piece bursts over here. So you get this kaleidoscopic understanding of the charism, rather than, climbing ladders. I mentioned that, I had just come from giving a retreat on Therese. And one of the things that Therese says is, I'm not climbing Mount Carmel. She says, I'm not living the way of perfection. She says, for me, I'm going up on the elevator. And she says, the elevator is Jesus' arms that just brings me right up there without having to climb stupid ladders. You fall off the ladder before you get to the top. So go the shortcut, she says. But in some ways, that's the threefold good as well. It's opening ourselves up to love as we find it really in 3 different dimensions. And that's really the starburst. We will keep the Monastery of the Risen Christ Oblates and dismiss the others. But before we're dismissed, will we stand? I didn't do this at Mass because I kept it for now. Bow your heads and pray for God's blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with loving kindness. And may you always enjoy the gift of God's peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.